So in our last two sessions, we've looked at understanding the physical component of addiction and what makes us powerless. In this session and the next one, I want to start looking at the psychological component of understanding our powerlessness. And one of the things that I hear constantly from clients is it's almost, as long as I can remember, there's been this emptiness inside of me. It's like there's been a hole in my heart. Something's been missing, and I've always been wondering what is missing, and I don't know that. And it just, once I found drugs and alcohol, it was like I finally found something that seemed to fill the hole in my heart. And then I found it really didn't fill it, it only made it worse. And what I like to do in order to help people really understand that is take them to Genesis chapter 1 to chapter 4. Because in those 4 chapters of God creating men and women, we're given an insight into how God created us. And it's how did He wire us? What did He create in us as our natural needs, our natural desires, our natural drives? And if I can understand that, then I get a sense of where this hole in my heart comes from. So what I'm going to share with you, I find with most of the clients, this is one of the workshops that gives probably the greatest insight into themselves and what caused the hole in their heart and what set them up for addiction. So I want to look at 12 things that God wired me for, or God created in me that I needed. So number 1 is God created me with this drive for pleasure. And if you look at your own life, you realize that many of the decisions that you make on a daily basis are guided by, will it be pleasurable? So when I think about what to have for supper, I don't think about having something I don't like at all. I think about what would be pleasurable. When I think of a vacation, it's not some mosquito-infested swamp that I want to go to. It's what would be a pleasurable vacation. So pleasure guides so much of the decisions we make on a daily basis. The second one is that God created us with this physical need for food and water. And that's a pretty basic one. That's what drives us. The third one is God, as you come into your teen years, you develop this sex drive. And then as you get into your adult life, it's little more than just being a sex drive. It's a desire to procreate. It's a desire to have your own family, your own kids, that you can create the next generation. What I want you to see just right up front is, if you look at the desire number 2, food and water, and sex and procreation, those are the 2 things that are necessary in order to keep life happening on planet Earth. So if the human race is not going to be wiped out, you basically have to have food and water, people got to eat and drink, and they have to create babies. That's the reality of keeping life happening. And those are the 2 things that God made the most pleasurable: sex, food, and water. And it's like God created the things you need to make life happen a very pleasurable thing. We're going to come back to how we've misused that. The fourth thing, and this now gets into the psychological component. God created every baby, every child with a need for love, respect, nurture, tenderness, and acceptance. The child comes in needing to know that they're okay, that they're loved for who they are. And when they fall and scrape their knee, they're not going to be smacked and told that they're stupid. They're going to be nurtured and comforted. And when they get a big nose or their ears stick out, they're not going to be laughed at, but they're accepted for who they are. That is such an important part for every child if they're going to grow to be healthy, and they crave it. The fifth thing that happens is we have this desire for a relationship. So every child that goes to school, they want to have a friend to play with after school. Then as they come into middle school and high school, they want to belong to a group. They want to feel that they're part of. And that peer pressure begins to be a big force in their life. But as they get a bit older, they really get tired of the phony intimacy that they find in the bar room or in the sports locker room. It's empty, it's superficial. Something in us drives us to desire intimacy. I want at least one relationship where I am fully known, fully accepted, fully respected and loved. That is such an important part of what drives us. And so that's built into us. The sixth one is security. Something in us wants to be safe. Something in us tells our kids, don't talk to strangers. Don't go past the front lawn onto the street. We put fire alarms in our house. We put security alarms in our homes. We put money in the bank in order to provide for the future. All of that is the desire to protect and to provide, that need for security. And every child needs to feel that home is a safe place. Because if it's not a safe place, they can't relax. They can't grow. They're very insecure. Then the next one is another very significant one. Something in us desires a sense of purpose or significance. We want to know that somehow, that when we get to the end of our lives, it made a difference. It counted for something. And the crying need of the Western culture today for the young people in it who have every toy, all kinds of possessions is, why am I here? They have no sense of purpose, and they're crying to have a sense of purpose. And we usually find that sense of purpose in a vocation. And a vocation is more than a career, though they can join. Vocation is, what is my life's calling? What do I want to give my life to? What gives me a sense of fulfillment? What can I contribute to the human race? And sometimes that is found in learning, in our job. All of that becomes an important part, even in hobbies, where we find that sense of purpose and significance. On the flip side of that need to work and make a difference, we have this need to also rest. To have some times in our life that are stress-free, where there will be no demands on us. And so we have this built into us that I don't mind working 5 or 6 days a week, but I want one day where the phone's not ringing, nobody's bugging me, I can just chill, do my own thing, and relax. And that is a balancing need that we find in all of us. The ninth thing that is there is that God has created us with a love and a longing for beauty. Again, think of where people go on vacation. They typically go to beautiful places, to the mountains, to the ocean, to some outdoor nature thing where they're impressed with fall colors or icebergs or whatever it is. It's beauty. And then people have an attraction to photography, to photograph beautiful people. That's built into us. It drives us. The next one is what I call worship, and I'm not using it in a religious sense. If you think of it in terms of wow, think of it this way. You take a young child and you take them to see fireworks for the first time, and it's like their eyes get as big as saucers, and it's wow, that is so cool. And what they learn is wow experiences give a lot of pleasure. And so they want more wow experiences. They want to repeat it. But then they learn something else. If they watch fireworks every night for a month, it goes from wow to boring. That's the way we're made. Wow experiences, when repeated, become boring. And so something in us knows that to continue to have a wow experience, I have to have a greater wow than the last wow. And so a child goes from fireworks to a new toy, to a new video game, to a bicycle, to a motorcycle, to riding a motorcycle 150 miles an hour on the edge of disaster where the adrenaline is just pumping like crazy. And then when they survive it, they go, wow, that was cool. Let's do it again. And there's the adrenaline rush that becomes the wow experience. But even with that, you have to constantly replace it. And what I always try to help clients realize is that if you are looking for your wow experiences in activities and things, you will always end up bored. God created us so that we would find the ultimate wow in a person himself. And the beauty of that is that he's infinite. And so I can continue to explore new aspects of him and never run out of wows. But we are created with a longing for worship. And if you think about addiction, in many senses, it is worship. It is the pursuit of a wow. It is a pursuit of an experience that takes me out of me and go, wow, that was so amazing. Let's do it again. The final one, before we move to our first observation, is that God created all of us with a longing for God. And I don't find very many addicts that would call themselves an atheist, because most addicts, when they finally hit a bottom, and they realize that they were powerless over drugs and alcohol or their addiction, they've cried out to God, and they've found that He's been there to help them. And so pretty well everybody I deal with realizes, yes, there's somebody bigger than me, somebody beyond me that's out there that wants a relationship, and that becomes their higher power. And so God has created us for those 11 drives to begin with. Now, let me give you an observation. When all of those appetites or needs or desires are provided for, I have a healthy, meaningful life. I have a sense of wholeness and completeness. It's like all my needs are met. I feel good. It's the way it's supposed to be. There's not a hole in my heart. I feel really good. But if one or more of those needs is not met in a consistent way, it sets me up for the final drive, and that is to feel wholeness. And this is so important to understand in addiction. Addiction is the drive to feel wholeness. If you can see it that way, it's the realization at a subconscious level something is missing. I have a hole in my heart, and my brain cannot relax as long as I feel emptiness. My brain is driven to try and find wholeness, and it will explore all kinds of different ways to try to fill that hole, but it is driven to feel wholeness. So the second observation is this: a person is set up for addiction, whether it's drugs or alcohol or activities, when one or more of those basic needs is not met in my life consistently. You want to know what that says? All of us are set up for addiction. You may not have chosen drug and alcohol, but you've probably chosen something else to try to fill the hole. Because all of us, no matter how good our parents were, will have some of those needs that were not met consistently. So, when I deal with addicts, I always put those 12 things on the board and I ask them, which one of those were not consistently met in your life while you were growing up? And I can always count on the same answers. It's number 4, 5, and 6, and number 11. Number 4 is that need to be loved, nurtured, accepted, and respected. Most addicts grew up in a home. In fact, 90% of addicts grew up in a home where they were not loved and respected and nurtured. They were criticized. Their parents were not emotionally available. They were abandoned. They were put down. They were rejected in all kinds of different ways. And they grew up feeling, I don't matter. Something's missing here. There's not the love. I didn't really connect with anybody. And most addicts grew up where a relationship of an intimate kind always resulted in pain. And so they didn't get that need met. And then home wasn't a safe place. They didn't feel secure there. And so those were the 3 major needs. And often it was they were not taught about God or how to have a relationship with God, or they were in a church that gave them a concept of God that was very destructive. And so those were the most commonly not met needs. So what is important to realize is that those number 4, 5, and 6, that nurture, love, relationship, security, those are needs that a child has from the time they're a baby. And so when those needs are not met consistently from the time of birth, that child experiences a massive hole in their heart. And they experience a lot of pain, a lot of subconscious pain that is always there. There's another way that a hole can develop in the heart, and I just have to mention, and that is through trauma. And you might be surprised to know that the most common trauma that causes a hole in a heart is divorce. I deal with clients every day, and they come in and they say, I had a good upbringing. I had lots of my needs were met. And I said, did your parents divorce? And they go, yeah. What was that? And I go, how do you think it affected you? And they go, oh, isn't that interesting? Because since they divorced, my life has gone downhill. And it's like the 2 people who were the rock in my life that provided me a place of safety and security were gone. And from their perspective, it's like they were abandoned. Their parents still may have tried to maintain contact, but they felt abandoned. They felt their security was gone. They felt all that mattered was gone. And it just created this massive hole in their heart. And if they grew up in a home where they really it wasn't really healthy, it was kind of dysfunctional, and they experienced any other kind of trauma, from death, from sexual abuse, physical abuse, rape, whatever, they didn't have the tools to deal with that. They didn't have a home of love and nurture where they could have that kind of trauma cared for and met, and they couldn't talk about it. They had to try and stuff it. And that just creates this massive hole in their heart. And so those are the kind of things that create a hole in the heart. So what I want you to realize is this. Addiction is all about trying to find wholeness the wrong way. It is about trying to fill the hole in your heart with the wrong stuff. And I want to give you 2 ways that people use to try and fill the hole in their heart. Number 1, they take one of those pleasurable needs, those pleasurable drives, whether it's food, water, sex, relationships, work, beauty, worship, adrenaline rush. They take one of those things and they go, oh, that felt good. Let's do more of it. So you picture a child that grew up in a home where they were criticized, laughed at, put down, told that they would never amount to anything, that kind of stuff. They got this pain in their heart, this hole in their heart. And then they discovered chocolate ice cream. And they go, wow, I feel good. For just a little while, I feel good. So every time I'm feeling a bit empty, I need some chocolate ice cream. And they start a food addiction. And then you get somebody that gets a little bit older. And they've experienced some trauma. They've experienced parents that have not been there for them. And there's an emptiness. And then they have their first look at pornography or their first sexual experience. And for the first time, they felt some tenderness, some nurture, some love. And they go, boy, that felt good. It filled the hole. Let's do more of that. So that is the first thing. So you look at all of the people who are workaholics, people who are foodaholics. Usually it's taking that thing that seemed to fill the hole and they just do more of it. They overcompensate. Give me more, give me more, give me more. And what happens, it's like salt water. It seems to satisfy the thirst. It just makes you thirstier. And that will happen whenever you try to overcompensate with one of those things. The second thing that people do, and I call it, they get their wires crossed. So let me again give you the kid that grew up and they were made fun of, put down, said they were a mistake, said we wish we never had you, all of those things. And they just feel awful. They have their first sexual experience and they feel that somebody loves them. And what happens is the brain gets the wires crossed because what they really need is to be nurtured, loved, and accepted. And what happened is they tried to meet that emotional need with a physical act called sex. And it seemed to meet the need, but it didn't. So the next time they're feeling lonely and they're not feeling nurtured and they're feeling kind of down on themselves, the brain says, you don't need nurture, love, and acceptance. You need sex. The wires get crossed. And here's what happens in addiction. You take, every time you feel lonely, the brain says, you need your drug. The wires get crossed. You start feeling stressed out and angry. The brain doesn't say you don't need rest and relaxation. The brain says you need a drink. The wires get crossed. Just about every need, you have begun to cross the wires by saying the solution is the drug. And so your wires are crossed badly in all of those areas. And that is what happens in addiction. So, that leads me to the 8th point. And that is this. Recovery happens when a person starts to learn how to meet all of those needs in a healthy, balanced way. And there's a couple of things I need to say about that. What I find as a pastor and an addictions counselor is this. Churches have done a lot of damage here. Because they have said to people, all you need is God. And you know what? God's an important piece of the puzzle. But there's 11 other needs that need to be met besides God. They need to learn how to have nurturing relationships where they can have true intimacy, where they can find safety and security. And the point is, every addict is looking for a quick fix, some golden key that will make me all better. And when Christians come along and say, you just need God and you're fixed, they go, super, I'll do it. And then after a couple months, they relapse and they go, okay, I guess God doesn't work. I'll try something else. And we do a real disservice to people by saying that. We need to be able to say, yes, you need God big time. But you need to learn how to meet all of these other needs in a healthy way. Let me say a second thing about that. When I find a client who is being triggered, they're craving, they're feeling the urge to use, the first thing that goes on in my mind is, I wonder which need is not being met in their life. Because the wires have been crossed for so long that some need is not being met and their brain says you need to use. And so the answer for a sex addict is usually not get more sex. It's find out how to nurture and have healthy relationships, because once you meet that need in a healthy way, the sex stuff takes care of itself. For a drug addict who's feeling triggered, it's what need is not being met in your life right now, and meet that need. Because if you try to meet it with the drugs and alcohol, it's just like salt water. You need to learn how to meet those needs in healthy ways. The final thing I want to say about this is God has given us an owner's manual on how to meet those 12 needs according to His design. What I find with people is, okay, sex is one of my needs. Good, I'll meet sex my way. And God says, no. I designed how sex is supposed to be used. You use it within my design, and you do all of those 12 things within my design, and then you find contentment and happiness. So you have to go back to the owner's manual. And what God says, number one, is that the first and the foremost thing that you have to get in place, the first piece of the puzzle, is that God-shaped vacuum in your heart. Jesus says you begin by loving the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. That's the greatest command. And the point is this. That's the first and the most basic need that needs to be met. Once that need is met, then you begin to meet the other needs. But that becomes the starting place. And so that gives us just the basic psychological understanding of what addiction is. In the next talk, I want to take that 4, 5, and 6, that nurture, love thing, and I want to explore that in greater depth to help you realize the ramifications it has in a child's life when those needs are not met. But hopefully for today, it helps you realize, oh, I can see why I have a hole in my heart now. I can have a roadmap now of what I need to do to get healthy and begin to take steps to do that. So let's pray. Father, thank you again that you have shown us in your word how you've designed us, and you have given us the roadmap for how to find a meaningful life that is characterized by deep joy and contentment. And I pray for each person who's heard this today, that you would just open their eyes and that you would help them realize that they need again to turn to you. And we just thank you for this time together. Amen.